Edouard, pleasure to have you on. I think a natural place to start is I want to talk about Trampoline, right? I'm obviously familiar with your startup and very interested to learn more today. Maybe walk us down the path of the genesis story. So, what led you to start this company?
For sure. Thanks for having me. We started Trampoline. It's a convoluted story because we started with something else before. But basically, we realized that what we were working on was really great to help people respond to RFPs. We also decided to tackle the challenge of very complex RFPs. We know that some RFPs are answered by just copy pasting a bunch of stuff. You can create a new proposal, but a lot of the time you need to gather the knowledge of six people and you need to project manage them toward a proposal within a few weeks. That process is super hard. It throws a wrench into people's work, and we felt, okay, like we can help with what the technology we have. So that's really what has become a trampoline. And as we started getting customers using it, we realized that, yeah, it's really good at building proposals, but it's really good at a lot of things, actually, in the context of a business where you need to have a lot of people coordinating themselves on a project that is not necessarily super core to the business. Lots of businesses have lots of side projects. They're not necessarily bad. You just need to do them. And our AI is like chief project manager for you.
Yeah, interesting, man. I know a little bit about this space just having run a professional service firm, and then we get this thing called an RFP. We have to spend 30 hours. I even remember answering RFP was just like this god awful long process. The documents are like 15 pages,
Yes.
very opaque because it's like on the other side, you're not sure exactly what they're looking for. So, yeah, like maybe walk us through then how the platform you've built injects the RFP and then kind of time to value for the users.
Yeah. So the way it works is that you upload any kind of document. So an RFP, let's say 300 pages long. Within 5 minutes, you will see the PDF that you uploaded, and you will see that on every important part of information, there is a highlight made by the AI. So you will see that the document has been highlighted just the way you would with a highlighter. And every highlight is creating an action item. That action item is spread on a Kanban board. So it looks like a Trello board or Jira board. It's basically an agile methodology of answering to an RFP. And so now each action item, you can basically talk with the AI and say, hey, can you assign all the security question to Nectario? Can you assign all the governance question to this person, all the legal thing to our lawyer, etc. So the idea is that within 20 minutes after uploading this document, all the questions are assigned to the right person. And each person receive all those questions, but they also receive a AI generated answer. And that answer has been generated on past answers that they've provided, past proposal that you've made, which means that the only work that they have to do is correct the AI answer, enrich it, and it ultimately validate it. And when they validate that answer, it becomes part of their knowledge base. So basically, work of answering the RFP also triggered a complete update of whatever posture or strategy or discourse they can have around their service proposal.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man. So it's yeah, it seems like obvious in hindsight is
Yeah.
why didn't this exist 5 years ago when I was answering RFPs and sweating on weekends with my team? It's like gotta work on this. But it's also such a broad space. Are you tackling it in any particular vertical? Because I can
Yeah.
imagine there are a lot of government entities tend to be the ones that issue RFPs, but then also megacorps are the ones doing it. How do you approach then the go to market? I'm going to bounce back to product, but curious
Yeah.
because that's the first thing that comes to mind.
So for every public RFP, like public tender from the government, there are like 8 private RFPs in the market. Okay. So yes, it makes sense to go after like companies who are heavily invested in bidding to the government, but there are lots of companies that I know of who don't bid too much with the government, but they bid a lot on private tenders, private RFPs. So it doesn't matter to us. What matters to us is that you're probably a service company or selling to enterprise. which means that you're not doing RFPs for relatively simple services. You need to propose a differentiated way of offering your services. So you may have a methodology, but what you're selling mostly is expertise, talent. And when you do this, you cannot just copy paste stuff and put them into a new proposal. You really need to show that you have a precise insight on that market, on that industry, and that you've done it before, or that you did something similar in the past and you could do something better this time. So it takes a lot of time to articulate this into a compelling proposal that people will read. Our system really shines in those situations.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. It's fascinating. What about the value on the person receiving the RFP? Like in terms of your product, right? Because I imagine the team that's prepared it, you accelerate the
Yeah.
time, they're able to do it in, I don't know, let's say 10% of the time. I'd be actually curious to hear you on that KPI, right? Like how much time is saved by the team and
Yeah.
how much better quality. But then what's the value for the end user that's receiving the RFP? Have you thought about the product experience? I imagine they're not the ones touching the product at all, but curious to how you think about it end to end.
Our system helps the people responding to the RFPs. Eventually, we will also be able to help people writing the RFP, building it. But just for the RFP response, we save our users between 60 to 80% of their time. The first time they use it, it's more like 60%. After a few months, it's going to be more like 80% because we have a machine learning algorithm that learns from every interaction in the system and that makes it better, optimized to your specific business. The end users, they're like three categories. Okay. They are the response manager, proposal manager. So the person leading the charge on, okay, we need to answer the RFP, guys. They are like a project manager, but not really. And they usually hate project managing that stuff. So they're really happy because this is a very simple software where they can just talk with the AI and the AI does a lot of things for them. Then we have the experts, so the subject matter experts. So those people are like the most busy people you can find in the business. They are usually very high worth billable hour people. So you need to protect their time. Those people really love this system as well because they don't have to repeat themselves. They just need to enrich the content that's already there. And then you find the compliance people, the content writer. So the people who will ultimately write the proposal. They just love it because they are for sure, they will never forget anything in the system that we've built. There is no way you forget about any requirement or any compliance matter. So those are the three kind of end users we have.
Yeah. And so far, what's the response been from users, right? Because you mentioned about a pivot, really focusing on RFPs. Maybe gives two-part questions, like sense of scale today in terms of Trampoline, and share any metrics, public metrics that you want. And then secondly, the value that the customers are seeing so far.
Yeah, sure. So basically, we right now we're focusing a lot on the quality of life of our users. We think that this is a good heuristic of knowing if the product is good. Like it's not just about statistics, time saved. It's also, do they like using it? And one thing that we discovered is that the product shined very bright when it comes to remote teams and distributed teams. So we've had most of our customers right now have multiple offices around the world. And that's really interesting because it is true that when you are answering to an RFP right now, you will have to organize meetings with everyone involved, like the 7 people team or the 10 people team that you're assembling to answer. You will make meetings. So first, you've already lost a week just to organize the first meeting, right? With our system, within 20 minutes, everybody's been dispatched to work. So that's something people really, because it means that there's less obstacle on the journey to respond to the RFP. One thing that we got from one of our customers in Montreal, he told us, this is the first time in my life that I receive an RFP and I don't have to worry. I don't have to stress. I don't have to call my wife and tell her that next week I might be working late on evenings and maybe I will have to work from the chalet on a Saturday. Because now that they have Trampoline, they can work on a bite-sized format, right? So it feels a little bit like a Duolingo. Like you can just go in, work for 30 minutes, go out, and it's fine. You don't need to block 4 hours of your time reorganize our entire schedule for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it's like I really see that like going back to like, shit, I wish I had this before.
Yeah.
And then in terms of is there in your value prop, do you have you seen any like better close rate from the customers? Like the ones that are using your platform, are they closing more deals versus I imagine the companies doing it the old fashioned way that take more time to answer? So what are the main drivers that have success for an RFP? Is it like the time to response? Because usually it's everyone's like until the deadline. Is it the quality of the answers? Of course, pricing is the big one. Double clicking here a little bit more on the model.
Absolutely. We don't have enough life, like we haven't been in the market long enough to say that. What we do know is that they've all been able to respond to RFPs way faster than they used to, with less stress. They've all won lots of tenders already. Another cool thing is that sometimes they get bids where it's explicitly said, do not use AI to answer that bid. And because everything in our system is architectured around a human in the loop element, like there's a human everywhere. So you know that the AI is never hallucinating anything. They feel very okay with using our system and saying it's not an AI like writing the document for you. It's an AI gathering the knowledge for you and helping humans do the work. Finally, the most important thing is that we have customers who started doing more RFPs as a result. So basically saving their time allowed them to bid more on opportunities that seemed a little bit more far-fetched. Now they're like, well, it's worth the time to just chase this opportunity just in case. And they actually won a few that we know of. So that's also interesting. It means that at the same conversion rate, if you start doing 20% more RFPs, the net gain at the end of the year is actually tremendous.
And yeah, that's fascinating, man. And like, where do you see your product evolving? I know it's been you're 2.5 years into the journey, from what I understand. So, how do you see the roadmap? How do you see expansion of what you're doing?
So right now, I think what gets started killed is the lack of focus. So we're trying to stay very focused on this very core use case, which is, hey, like the journey is very clear. Like you get an RFP, you need to engage all your subject matter experts as fast as you can, have them certify the content, and then write the proposal. And you can do this in a few hours with our system. There are like two remaining parts that we're working on right now to say that this core use case is feature complete for us to expand the use case. One is tracking requirement changes. So sometimes, a lot of time when you're working on an RFP or any project for that matters, requirements change, right? So stuff that you started working on, you end up not being true. So you need to revert some of the work. So imagine that you have this Trello board and you have 80% of the cards completed, and then you receive an addenda or you receive a new information that changes stuff. We want to be able that some cards go back into the Kanban board so that you know which cards are like linked to those changes. So you can revet the information and make sure that everything is fine so that you can produce that final document. So that's one thing that we're working on. And the second thing is really the ability to load a document and tell the AI, this is what we want to do. So it's not an RFP anymore, but maybe it's a different thing. Okay. It could be like an annual report. It can be, yeah, like we have a lot of different use cases. One of which the most requested of them is, hey, we are a city council and we need to write RFPs to go to the market. Can you help us with that? And we can. So we're thinking of all use case and yeah, like enabling these with our system.
Yeah, fascinating. I was going to say we could probably riff on a bunch of neat ideas and how you use agents, etc. I guess the natural path, since you have an expansive vision, but like you said, focus for now. Do you see yourself going down the VC route? Do you see yourself trying to raise capital to go big? Get curious to hear you on it.
No, it's we've already took VC money, so we're fairly much committed on that route. For me, just VC money has to be for one purpose only, and it's really fueling an engine that's working. So right now, we still think we're pre-PMS, like we're signing new deals twice a month now. it's still a, like, I'm very skeptical with, it takes a lot for me to be like, okay, this is an interesting, like, we feel cool and it's consistent and everything. So I'm still a bit worried that we might not be PNF enough, or that it's not, the value is not explained well enough, maybe too. But yeah, as soon as we see the growth being more predictable, VC money is absolutely the route for us, especially since as we expand on the use cases that we support, there's a little chance, I think, that, like, in our ambition, that we could become the next Trello. And yeah, like, that's something I want to chase. I want to try to become that.
Yeah. You mentioned Trello because I was watching your demo before, and it's very similar in terms of use, but also you're building something that's AI native, right? So I think there's some cool stuff that you guys have built into the product.
Yeah.
In terms of your go to market, like you guys have built like a really neat kind of like lead magnet tool with,
Yeah.
I'll let you speak about it, but how much of it is inbound, outbound? And how do you see that evolving in terms of your sales strategy? Because I imagine it's every company on the planet. It's like, how do you go after the opportunities in essence?
Yeah. So we really go after companies who have pre-sales people in their teams. If you don't already have hired to manage the complexity of your sales process, you're probably not a good fit for us. It's important to realize, for people who don't know, right now, in most enterprise deals and service deals, 70% of those deals hinges on the pre-sales team. So somebody who wants to define what the work has to be, define the scope of the work so that you can come to a pricing with the conviction that you have good margins and room for errors so that you can have a good relationship with that customer. So if you haven't hired somebody to do this, you probably don't have a very complex RFP response process or a sales proposal process. So that's really where we are.
Yeah, interesting. And then I want to maybe take a step back and talk about your journey as a founder and as an entrepreneur. So, it's like, why go through this hiring journey? You've had good positions in the corporate role, even though you've been very close to an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial scene for a long time. So, why start a tech startup?
I've been an entrepreneur like half of my life, but more in the service industry before. I've always knew that building a product was the hardest thing. Building a service can be, I'm not saying it's easier, but it's easier at the beginning for sure. Harder to scale. Product is the opposite, maybe. Once you have a really good product, I feel it's a bit easier. So yeah, to me, it's a challenge. Some people like to run the trails. Some people like to go at the Everest. I went the entrepreneur route. For me, it's a challenge. It forces me to be more disciplined every week, to really engage fiercely, contrarian ideas, look at the market, work on my fears. So yeah, that part is very interesting to me. And I also feel like I've always wanted to contribute to the society, and I'm happy that the RFP problem found us, because I worked on a lot of them, and yeah, the process is absolutely disgusting. Like, it's really hard to do. And so, yeah, if I can help businesses do this better, I'm so happy I can.
Yeah, I like the openness on some of the scars, etc. Can you talk to us a little bit about the early days of Trampoline? How you came up with the idea? And I know
Yeah.
you switched from a more broad-based use case to RFP specifically. I want to double click on the how do we come up with something that creates a lot of value for people? Do you mention of solving a societal challenge?
Yeah.
And then on that journey of, okay, we have to steer the car, and sometimes we take a left turn or right turn. So you double click what went through on your in your head there.
So when we started Trampoline, the idea was, hey, now that there are AIs, like ChatGPT are very good because they're trained on a lot of knowledge around the world, right? If you want to use AI within your business, it's going to be not so good because the AI hasn't been trained on your data. So the first thing we did was, hey, can we create like a search engine so that you can find any information in your Slack, in your Teams, in your emails, your Drive, etc. So we did this. We started working with design partners, and after 8 months, we had a functional alpha working. We put it into the end of users, and we realized a few things. The first thing was that The rate of utilization was about 5 times a week, which was, it didn't seem much. The second thing that happened was that we saw that the users were looking at the search results, and either they were like, I'm not sure those are the right results. And when we were asking them, did you expect something else? They were like, I don't know. Or they would tell us, this is a good result and I understand why it's top, but it's actually not the right document. And what we realized is that actually 99% of the documents and discussion and everything were never even searched, which means that you're basically searching, like indexing a lot of data, but you don't use it. But one thing that we saw was that at some point we had two companies back to back started using our system like 17% more for just 1 week. And we're like, what's going on? Why are you using it so much? And they're like, oh yeah, we just got an RFP. And I was like, oh, interesting. It is true that an RFP like triggers a big search for a lot of information in your company. I've been there. And so I was like, okay, that's very interesting. There's something to be done around that. One thing that they were complaining about was that we were supposed at the time to have a system where if the search results are not very good, you can use an AI agent to ask someone in the company what is the right answer to that question. And the idea was that over time, you would basically augment the search results with what other people in the company had said about that question. And people will really like that. So we went back to the drawing board and we said, okay, if you're going through a process of gathering a lot of content, maybe we should not be tapping into Teams, Slack, Drive, because that information is absolutely not useful. Maybe what we should be doing is just ask people what is the right information. And over time, leverage AI so that they never repeat themselves. They just enrich whatever it is said like 2 months ago about something, so that the information is always the best it can be. It's always validated. So the AI does fewer and fewer hallucination over time. So that's what we went with last year.
Yeah. And you also don't have to train your model on data that's not as relevant, like you mentioned, like email or Slack. You save a bit of compute on that front.
No, exactly. And it's like people tend to think when it comes to search, they like the bar is very high because they think of Google. What they need to realize that Google is really good because the whole world is writing for Google. When you publish something on a website, you make it optimized for a search engine. So 50% of Google's job is already done for them. The second thing that is very important in Google is that Google is looking at backlinks. So they want to know how many websites are sending traffic to another website. And they use this as a heuristic, so as a way of determining that this website is authoritative. So essentially, the idea of Google is that a lot of humans are manually saying, this is an authoritative website, such as Wikipedia. What we will do is that we will ask people to select manually the documents they should be using so that the AI can have the best knowledge. You have a very fast AI that's using the best information it can with the knowledge that this information is accurate.
What's most misunderstood in your view about enterprise AI today? There's been a lot of, let's say, memes about it. Oh, it doesn't work. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
experimenting, but they didn't see the value. And obviously, if you're vibe coding a CRM, maybe not, but there's so many different like parts of the stack you could operate on. What do you think people don't get because you're so close to what's going on?
It's really like a matter of expectations. Take ChatGPT. ChatGPT is really good, as I said, because it's trained on billions of data points from the internet. But it makes it also very generalistic, right? Basically has a universal knowledge base. When you put it into your business, it's going to be generally good, but then it's going to be very bad at things that actually make your business unique. What makes your business unique is where actually general language model will suck. okay? Because they will not be as good as understanding what makes it so unique, what makes it so special. So a lot of people expect that the AI can now act as an all-knowing entity in my business and do stuff that humans don't like to do. And it's not going to work. You will need to feed it better data. It's still a data engine. Like the data you give it determines a lot the outputs you get, garbage in, garbage out. Giving the AI better knowledge, better data is actually super hard. There are no ways of doing this really well unless you use tools like Trampoline, because that's what it is. Like Trampoline is exactly, we call it like a context capture. We try to get as many information as we can from people, because that's the thing. Like businesses move very fast. So you cannot ask an AI to know that between this morning at 9 and tonight at 5, you had 15, 20 discussions with different people. That cannot refine what you think you should be doing for this project. AI has no access to all the discussions. And even if it had listened to everything that you've said during the day, it doesn't know what you filtered in and out. It doesn't know any of that. So even if you have this AI recorder on you, it's still not super valuable. At some point, you need to stop yourself and talk with the AI and say, this is what I'm thinking now. This is my new thinking about this stuff. And because you need to make a judgment call. And a lot of people right now, when they look at an AI, they expect the AI to predict what should be done and also have enough judgment to decide on what should be done. And I think that the judgment part is essentially human. It's not a machine. Like a machine cannot do it because a machine doesn't have the consequences, right? Like it's really hard to make good judgment calls if you don't suffer the consequences of your judgment calls.
Yeah.
And a lot of people's judgment calls in an organization nowadays have a lot to do with the anticipated consequences. Like they're thinking about themselves and their team, right? So, yeah, I think people need to realize that the AI has to be a tool, but there has to be a human in the control tower. But you still need a lot of humans in the control tower.
How do you use it for yourself, either personal or work? How are you using these new tools?
Oh, wow. I use it in many ways. Of course, we use Trampoline for ourselves. So every time we get a security questionnaire, when we do grant applications, we use Trampoline. I'm a big user of Gumloop. It's like an A10. I use Gumloop to create a lot of workflow automations. For example, like our entire security compliance framework is like I augment my work with Gumloop. So for example, every quarter we have a meeting with all the engineers where we review everything security related. I basically have an agent that listens to that meeting. And at the end of the meeting, it does the minutes of that meeting, but it also triggers a few AI so that my risk register is updated. I have a lot of databases that keep track of our compliance posture that are automated using this. So this is really a huge time saver. We also use those agents to help us with sales. So we have a lot of sales augmentation workflows. In the personal life, I use ChatGPT quite a lot. And of course, all our team is using Cursor and the best models to code Trampoline.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk these days, especially on Twitter, about, hey, like our employees need to be AI native. And it's, if you're not using an AI tool or you have to prove that you're using it, maybe the broader question here is you're building your startup, Edouard, is how do you think about culture given that you're AI native in that sense? You're building an AI company. Does it change from the good old fashioned company building? What's different? What's the same for you and obviously in your own company?
The cost of trying out new thing is lower. For example, for our go-to-market, we worked on a tool that is called Go No Go. It's a free tool. It's something that in the past I would have probably not done because putting code behind a marketing system is overkill. But now that it took us just a few weeks to basically make it available to our customers, like the model behind we already had. that makes it very different. Like all of a sudden, you can create value very fast for your customers at places where usually you're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. We also changed the way we design things. So we try to have a very, like, I don't want to call it radical ownership, but it's like that. So if you're building a feature for Trampoline, we tell you what's expected in terms of outcome for the user, and then you're working on it. We don't ask you for a wireframe. Like we don't do anything in Figma. You just start doing it using your best intuition. And once you've done a big chunk of it and you think that, okay, like it looks good, you will show it to us. And then we will challenge you on a few things that you did. And based on that feedback, you will come back and say, okay, it's almost done. And then we'll do a second round of feedback. But it's very interesting because basically it means that now we are hiring people who have actually good judgment. So culture, if you think about culture, for me, it's really hard to have an AI native organization if you don't value everyone's judgment and if you don't encourage people to make more judgment calls faster. The AI is doing predictions, like it's saying, this is the code you should be doing. And then we need to say, I accept that we code it this way, or maybe we should code it another way. So yeah, a lot of organizations are organized differently. They don't like employees making judgment. They like employees following rules. And that's a big problem if you have an AI native organization. It means that yeah, it's just rules and code. And at some point, there's no human emotion or anything, which means that your users, they will think you're completely crazy shipping those things that clearly no human has reviewed before.
It's like people do not like mention the value of human judgment. Like that's
Yeah,
not going away. So I find that's a critical piece.
it's a critical piece, and a good judgment is rare. Like most people don't necessarily have good judgment. And if you just rely on an AI to do your work, at some point your competitor will do the same. And so what? We will have three different companies using the same AI inference point from endpoint from like OpenAI and Anthropic and maybe Grok or whatever. If they are all just using AI, no human in the loop to steer the AI into specific directions, those companies are failed. Like it's not going to work for them. How do we make sure that the people we work with amplify the AI by doing exceptionally good judgment calls?
Yeah. No, you're touching upon how knowledge work is changing, right? Whereas
Yeah,
if you're doing something that's really repetitive that an algorithm could do, chances are it will be done by one. But if it's something that's, like you said, high value, that's different for difficult to scale, that's where you come in, right?
absolutely.
Maybe a final question or two, Edouard, is like, what's the future look? If we have this conversation again in 2 years, what does Trampoline look like? And maybe a little bit of the vision for your company.
For sure. The way I work is I'm maintaining different potential futures of the company because I love strategy. And I think a good strategy is being adaptable to the cards you have in your hands. You don't have control over all the cards that you will get in your hands, like the timing, the geographic situation of your company, a lot of that changes. So the way we work is we have three potential futures for Trampoline. We're always thinking of the most ambitious one, but we're also very comfortable with the idea that maybe that won't be possible and it will still be a very beautiful company that will bring a lot of value to our customers. So I won't go too much into the details there because yeah, like that's something we try to keep for ourselves and our investors. But in 2 years, I think we can expect that Trampoline will make a significant impact in the service industry and enterprise sales for all the pre-sales operations. That's for sure. And ideally, as I said, we are trying to maybe become the next Trello. That is something Gabriel and I very much believe in.
Yeah, no, fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, there's so much we could talk about. Maybe to be respectful of your time, Edouard, if people want to follow the journey and kind of keep tabs on what you're doing, what's the best way?
Yeah, so there are like three ways to follow us. The first one is my LinkedIn on LinkedIn and Trampoline's page on LinkedIn. We don't use it as much as we should, but that might change. They can also follow the journey from the technical standpoint more on X. Gabriel is trying to share some of his thoughts on the technology that we're building on X. I encourage them to go there. I'm available also on Instagram, where I share a lot of absolutely non-work related stuff, because it's not just all about work, what we're doing. Thank you.